I think we're live. Looks like it. Let me do a quick check here. And sometimes it takes a little longer for YouTube to lock in. So we'll wait. Okay, I think we are live. Let's see if we are live on the live chat here. Not yet.
Instagram notification, you're live there.
Yep.
Coming up on YouTube.
Instagram. We're just waiting for YouTube to log in.
Here we go.
Oh, there it is. Took some time. Okay. Well, a little bit of a lag. All right. Well,
Better late than never.
exactly. Better late than never. Well, we're going to have a fun evening, as it is a very special evening. For the first time, I think, since I've been doing these live chats, we are doing this in the middle of a Mets playoff game. So I do have the playoff game set up here. It's currently 1-1. JD Martinez is up to bat, so we'll see what happens for tonight. The Mets could move forward. But, of course, you're here for the weather. First of all, I want to apologize for last week. Something hit me. I don't know what it was, but I am okay now. And I made sure I was okay, so hopefully that isn't a repeat. Tonight, we are going to focus on some tropical forcing, details on some preliminary thoughts on the winter, and of course, taking all of your questions. Not a lot to talk about in terms of current weather because it is as quiet as it could possibly be. And unfortunately, that's leading to some growing drought conditions as well because it has been bone dry, and I don't see any change to that anytime soon, at least over the next 15, 16 days. So, unfortunately, not much is going to change. But I do have some good news in the tropics, so let's dive into that. So currently right now, in the tropical Atlantic, we have one very obvious storm, which is out here. This is Kirk. We're going to talk about that in a second. But as you can see, it is growing very nicely, and it is well on the way to becoming a major hurricane. The good news is that Kirk is running into this trough. Boy, we've heard this quite a bit when dealing with storms in the Atlantic. This trough is going to start to pull it northward. This disturbance will kick it out. So yeah, no threat to the United States, but certainly a very impressive system. This system, the outflow, is impacting this one right here. This is tropical depression number 14, I believe. And tropical, let me double check that. It should be 14. I'm losing count lately on all these tropical depressions of late. And no, 13. I was off by one. Unlucky 13. So 13 is getting sheared by the outflow from Kirk. So as you can see, the movement of the outflow right here, pretty long, very impressive large storm. Well, once Kirk lifts northward, this storm's going to have the capability to develop and intensify. So we're going to have to watch out for development right around here for possibly the next hurricane. But again, because of below normal heights and troughs basically over the Western Atlantic, that too is more than likely to get kicked out. Next, we have a disturbance. Oh, wow. Mets just got on base with an error. Nice. Next, we have this disturbance out here. This is going to be a fun evening, by the way. If I just lose my mind, I think you know why. Next, we have this disturbance out here, which is somewhat interesting. Well, look, there's like a 40% chance that this could develop. And there were a lot of people making a lot of big deal about this disturbance, calling it the next Helene. Okay, but it's not. It's not in any way, shape, or form. First of all, the disturbance is barely developing. We have a cold front boundary here hanging around, so you could see a wave of low pressure kind of developing to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula, but it's also battling quite a bit of dry air. Whatever does develop is going to get forced through Florida and out into the Western Atlantic. So, again, pretty good chance of rainfall no matter what happens around the Florida Peninsula. That is pretty much about it. Zooming in, let's talk about Kirk, because that is the most impressive storm this evening and one that I think is pretty cool to monitor. The thing with hurricanes, I do love watching hurricanes develop, but they're even more fun when the hurricane is not going to be impacting anyone. So you can enjoy the beauty of the development without having to worry about the destruction of the storm. And that is exactly what we're going to be dealing with here, as Kirk is going to be lifting up into the central Atlantic. And by the time we get to Monday, and we got a base hit. Nice. It looks like the Mets are going to try and first and third. Okay. So we'll see whether or not they score here. So as you can see, Kirk is going to be lifting up into the northern Atlantic. That's going to be interesting to see how that impacts our negative NAO pattern for the fall, which has been pretty persistent. We're going to talk about that in a moment as well. But one thing's for sure, it's more likely going to become a major hurricane, and we could see that process developing right now. Look at this storm. Beautiful. And I love to watch this, mostly because I have a clear conscience because I know it's not going to hit someone's home, flood someone out, or anything of that nature. Here is what's beautiful about this storm. Look at the expansion of the outflow here. Just a perfect example of the release of latent heat, that process of rising from the ocean and expelling out into the atmosphere, transferring that heat energy, trying to create a balance in the atmosphere from the vertical and horizontal. And we know that it is getting ready to rapidly intensify. It's currently right now 90 mile per hour winds up, and the Mets do take the lead. There we go. All right. And what's wonderful about this development is that this is going to create a balance in the atmosphere. And one of the things we're watching here, because currently the storm has 90 mile per hour winds, this most likely by tomorrow morning is a major hurricane. How do we know this? Well, we know that the heat towers, let's zoom in on this even more. Look at these heat towers are starting to form right around the eye wall. The eye itself is starting to consolidate and develop. What does this mean? It means that you're having rapidly rising air and then sinking air in the middle of the low pressure system. Okay, so you're having that whole process, the warm core process, developing, maturing, growing in strength, and taking shape here. And the strong lifting as such is featuring all these warm cores right here, these heat towers, right? They're forming right around the eye wall. That is a great sign of a vertically stacked storm that is capable of rapidly intensifying. And again, I would not be surprised sometime between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. tomorrow that we end up with a Cat 3 hurricane. It's 90 mile per hour now. There's plenty of warm water. There's no shear, no dry air, nothing to stop it. Could easily become a category 4 hurricane by the time we get to the end of this, by the time we get to Friday. Absolutely. But again, no impacts to land, no impacts to the United States, not even with tides or anything of that nature. So that's certainly some great news. Hopefully shipping lanes are already moving out of the way of this storm and can stay far away, as it is going to be one very nasty hurricane in the central Atlantic. So we've seen quite a bit of activity lately. And here's what we can expect with the model guidance here. Our Tropical Depression 13 is something that we're going to watch to see how far north it gets beyond the Leeward Islands. If it's well north of Puerto Rico, it's going to curve out pretty quickly. If it's cutting just to north of Puerto Rico, and we got another base hit, and it looks like, wow, the Mets are really taking these. What is going on with the infield? Everyone's tripping. Jesus. But the good thing is that Tropical Depression 13 most likely is going to curve out into the northern Atlantic and not be a threat, but we'll keep an eye on it. The closer it gets to Puerto Rico, the more of a threat it's going to be for the eastern United States. So again, we'll watch that. I don't want to say no, that has no threat whatsoever, because there is at least 1 or 2 miles, at least takes it close to the north of Puerto Rico, and then with the timing of the troughs here, you always have to watch out for that threat. Meanwhile, we have a couple of signals here coming off the African coast, but both of those signals suggest either a tropical depression or tropical storm could develop, but that is about it. And of course, there's our development around the Yucatan Peninsula. This is over the next 10 days. This might be it in terms of activity in the tropical Atlantic. I think we are reaching the apex and we're about to back off. Why is that the case? The MJO. The MJO forecast here the MJO itself has been moving through phase 7, 8, and 1. These are active phases for tropical development for the Atlantic Ocean. And when you see this type of activity really grow, when you see this support in the MJO really develop, well, it's no surprise that during a La Nina year or a developing La Nina year, that you would see all this increase in activity. But it is forecast to move into a neutral state and then through phases 5, 6, and creeping out to around 7 by November 1st. So really, for the rest of the hurricane season, which technically ends on November 1st, you're moving into a tropical forcing state that is less supportive of tropical development. So where do I get this idea from? Well, see, these are the MJO phases, and you can find this at the cpc.ncep.noaa.gov. These are the MJO tropical composites. And when we look at the tropical season, and again, we're moving into phase, where are we moving into phases? Let's go back to that. We're going back to phase neutral, 5, 6. Right? So then what does that mean here? Neutral is basically little impact at all. 5, 6, suppression. For much of the season here, we were in these zones here. And that's why much of the season was pretty quiet and nowhere near the type of activity that we were expecting because of that substance and sinking air. So we're going to see that again coming back for the end of the season. So I'm expecting a reduction in activity really starting to take hold by this weekend and really starting to show up by the middle of next week when we consider the lag time in the MJO phases. So right now we have been in these phases here, which are more supportive. And you can see that even better here when we take a look at the 200 millibar vertical velocity. Okay, vertical velocity potential here. Now, we are here, uptick in tropical activity. The rest of the hurricane season, we're in this, which is sinking air, subsidence. So this is great news to basically put an end to the threat for tropical systems impacting the United States and, of course, the Caribbean and the rest of North and Central America. This doesn't mean that you won't see any tropical systems, but you won't see the explosion of development that we are seeing now. Okay, I think this is kind of the last hurrah and it starts to back off. So we know there has been a less than impressive hurricane season than what we were expecting. And let's face it, even the portions of the Western Pacific haven't exactly been very robust. So this has been a very unusual tropical season compared to the forecast. So you could take a couple of different processes with this. You could just blame climate change and move forward and that's it. And, you know, I'm seeing that response a lot. Like, well, this is clearly because of climate change. I'm like, okay, well, let's discuss the forcing properties, because then if we understand what caused these forcing properties, then we can adjust that for other seasonal forecasts, like the winter forecast, for example. So I decided to go a different route and say, okay, let's discuss what caused this change in the forecast compared to what we were expecting. And part of this was the slow development of La Nina. La Nina was expected to develop much quicker, but it's been kind of slow, right? It's still not established yet. It's starting to get there, but with no strong La Nina signal, then you don't have the reduction in shear, and your MJO becomes more of a factor, which would explain why we didn't see the rapid explosion of well above normal tropical development. If we had a sustained La Nina, then the MJO becomes a non-factor. And when the MJO becomes a non-factor, then you have a far more favorable environment for the tropical Atlantic. I mean, you had plenty of fuel, as in the warm waters. So if you had low shear, you had less dry air involved, and you were dealing with all this warm water, yeah, it's a pretty good case for above normal activity. But that didn't happen. So we have to recognize that this La Nina is most likely going to be weak and slow to develop. We also see that we have a nice, robust, negative PDO. We've been watching this very carefully. It had a little bit of a warming phase during the middle of August into early September, but that has since subsided. So we have a clear negative PDO signal here. And the La Nina that is developing, it's more central to east base, somewhere in this ballpark here. We're not seeing a very strong expansion towards the western zones. So your La Nina is focused here. This would lead to a lot of your forcing supporting more convection right around the date line, which is going to be a factor. But a lot of that doesn't matter if we don't see the SOI pick up. Right now it's, it's as neutral as you can get. It's zero. Nothing. So what would have to happen is that we have to start to see this this SOI signal really shift more towards a positive state, towards, let's say, around 10. Let's just get to 10. Let's try to shoot for that. Because then that would signal a weak La Nina influence on the weather pattern. If you don't have that, then you have to take a step back and consider this winter to be influenced more by, basically a near normal winter. No La Nina or El Nino impacts. In which then that may make snow lovers very happy, because then you get both jet streams equal strength, battling each other, interacting with each other, possibly supporting some support of, let's say, high latitude blocking. So we have that factor that we're going to be watching very carefully. Let's step back and learn from our mistake with the Atlantic hurricane forecast. If this La Nina does not establish itself, then you must back off on those La Nina influences. But I do think it's going to develop. I think it's going to be weak, and somewhere between 0.6 and 1. And the SOI will touch 10. But what's the orientation? Well, this is something that I'm watching with the subsurface. There's clearly more support for the subsurface, featuring the coldest sea surface temperatures around Nino 3 and partially 3.4. I never like to focus on Nino 1 plus 2 because that zone is very shallow. So it can be warmed and cooled very rapidly. So you really don't want to use that as a base measurement. So where is Nino 3 and 3.4? Let me scroll up to show you where that is. That is essentially here. This zone right here. Now let's go back. What was I looking at? This zone right here, right? We're looking at somewhere between 170 and let's say 120. Well, that takes us right about here. Right in this zone right here. So what that tells us is that the forcing most likely is going to be focused around the date line for convection, and that would displace our southeast ridge more towards the Bahamas. And so when we look at our winds and when we look at the evolution of our 500 millibar pattern, it would suggest that the southeast ridge would get displaced either along or off the coast, and would increase the potential for more of your troughs in the subtropical jet stream, more towards the Tennessee River Valley rather than the Mississippi River Valley. And that can make a big impact on your storm tracks. While all that's happening, hey, we finally got a sustained polar vortex. Interesting to see a lot of the stronger winds cutting through North America around the mid-latitudes and swinging its way up towards our polar vortex. It's not the strongest one I've ever seen, but certainly has pretty good organization. At 70 millibars, I'm very interested in this signal here, these waves here. This tells me, okay, when I see these waves, I see like a lot of disruption here in the atmosphere. This is not a strong polar vortex setting up here right now. That could easily change. But when I'm seeing this, I've been watching this for a couple of days now, where you're getting this signal, you're getting a lot of waves, right? You're getting a lot of disruption in the evolution of our circulation. This may be one of the factors that is helping us with our high latitude blocking regime. I think a lot of it is being driven, quite frankly, by our sea surface temperature right now. You have your negative PDO helping to support a trough right around the Aleutians, and you have all this warm water that would certainly help below normal heights here and above normal heights here. So it would definitely be a nice signal for your negative NAO. But this certainly has my attention. Okay, when I see this, I'm seeing a lot of competing waves and a lot of destruction when you see that. Not the type of signal that I would see for a strong polar vortex to develop. So we got a couple weeks to watch this. I'm not jumping the gun yet, but this is certainly a very interesting observation that I want to watch out for. So for much of October and into November, the model guidance here is going with a persistent negative NAO signal. Now, I know there's a lot of people that have, they do statistical analysis and tend to say, hey, look, when the NAO is negative for much of fall, then the winter it goes positive. And there are reasonable forcing mechanisms that would support that outcome. Part of that is the way that the atmosphere evolves. But we need to remember we're not playing with the same type of atmospheric conditions as what you would compare in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And no, I'm not talking just about climate change, but I'm also talking about the influence of our volcano that has had on the stratosphere. This factor has clearly created some havoc with our high latitude blocking regimes. And when you combine that factor with the fact that we're starting to shift more towards a weak east-based La Nina, east-based La Nina, especially weak ones, tend to support sustained negative NAO regimes. You combine that with the warm Atlantic, it's certainly something to consider. But we also have a positive QBO state. And a positive QBO state is not supposed to let high latitude blocking linger like this, especially once the polar vortex is established. So I'm thinking that this La Nina this negative NAO signal is going to trend more towards a neutral state as we move through November, which is going to make this winter very interesting because I don't think we have a sustained negative NAO, but I do think we see periods. And now you combine that with troughs more likely to be focused around the Tennessee River Valley and the subtropical jet stream, and polar troughs over the eastern United States with our La Nina influence. Well, it could lead to more interactions and a lot of wintry mix type scenarios in the northern mid-Atlantic, and a better snow potential for New England and the Poconos, the Catskills, the Hudson Highlands, northwest New Jersey, maybe the Lehigh Valley as well. So these are certainly factors that we definitely have to consider as we move forward. And so that's why we're seeing in our long-range guidance this persistence of above normal heights here. It's something that definitely has caught my eye. But I have to stress, remember last year, the model guidance was very, very aggressive with above normal heights around Greenland. It didn't pan out as well. So we have to wait. But if we get this negative NAO signal showing up and you get these troughs lingering around here, then you can end up with a storm track, let's say, cutting through New Jersey or cutting through the Delmarva Peninsula. And then sometimes with a positive NAO cutting into, let's say, central New York. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, a lot of movement here in this evolution. let's see here. In this setup, over the next 15 days, you can see that signal with the below normal heights here over the Canadian Maritimes. So you can see that pattern setting up, but also notice you're getting a lot more influence here from the Pacific with the ridge kind of backing off here. So this tells me also that we're ending up with more near normal temperatures, which is why when I see this signal here, I think this is a bit overdone. I like down here because of the rainfall, but I think this is overdone. I've been noticing a lot of talk about frost being a potential and stuff like that, but it looks like to me like more than likely you're going to end up with more of a moderate near normal temperature regime. What is ESPN doing? Did they take the Mets game off and move it? I hate ESPN. Let's see. I gotta check this out. Give me 1 minute. Let's see what they did. Yeah, they moved the Mets game in the middle of the telecast. Wow. I hate ESPN. I apologize. Huh?
They're not well liked.
Yeah, I hate ESPN with them. They should just put all the playoff games on the network, on the regular TV stations that everyone is used to watching these games, because it'd be so much better at SNY. But I digress. As you can see, like I said, just to rebound, I think this is a bit overdone. I think more than likely we'll end up with more of a weather pattern where we end up with more closer to near normal temperatures here. But we'll keep an eye on it. But one thing I do agree with the model guides, I don't see much in the way of rainfall. And the reason why is because I don't see much in the way of storms. Very progressive cold fronts. That's about it. And part of that, let me refresh this real fast, is the nature of our polar jet stream here. Now, look, yes, there's plenty of waving and a lot of blocking here, setting up here. But you see this zonal jet streak right here? This is going to flood Canada with a lot of Pacific air, especially southern Canada. Where are we getting these air masses from? Central and southern Canada. So you're going to have a modified polar air mass with a lot of Pacific influence. So I don't like the idea of well below normal temperatures. And I do like the idea of very fast moving cold fronts here. Not much in the way of precipitation. Why? Because of our subtropical jet stream. And by the way, look how much this is very active for a La Nina, for a developing La Nina. This is a very active subtropical jet stream. So with a very active subtropical jet stream, again, I'm not all that impressed with anything that tries to develop down here. It's going to be running into quite a bit of shear and get kicked right out into the northern Atlantic. And this signal here that keeps on showing up with this trough along the east coast, that's going to protect us from anything that tries to develop out here. So a very fast-moving weather pattern, one with a lot of fast-moving cold fronts. Not much in the way of rainfall. So unfortunately, I'm not seeing much in the way of any support to clear anything out in terms of helping out with the lawn or anything of that nature. It's good for weddings. Everyone appears to be having a wedding right now. So that's certainly some good news. If you have some outdoor plans for weddings, engagements, all that stuff, hey, this is the weather pattern for you, because I'm not expecting much in the way of rainfall over the next 10 to 15 days. There just isn't much really to talk about. And over the next, let's say 90 hours, look at the cold fronts and look where the focus is of the short waves here. They're all focused to the north of us. The strongest lifting is all focused towards the St. Lawrence River Valley. Same thing here over New England. At 850 millibars, there's not a lot of lifting. And so when you have this set up here, even when you transport moisture northward, it just isn't being utilized. And at 700 millibars, there's a lot of dry air pockets because you have a lot of substance involved. So again, if you have plans for this upcoming weekend, I got good news for you. Plenty of sunshine, tranquil conditions are expected. Not else much is going on. And in terms of the 850 millibar temperatures, on the operational guidance, during this time period from day 7 to 10, The 12Z, the 0Z guys from last night was much colder. It's starting to back off. And that you're going to see that a lot over the next 15 days or so, where the Malgans is a lot more aggressive with these polar air masses. But then as they actually approach and we get the better observations that these air masses are modified, that's going to basically start to back off. And that's what we're seeing now with the guidance already. Hopefully that's not the story for the entire rest of fall and winter. But again, you need to see more snow growth in northern Canada. You need to see more growth in terms of a ridge on the western United States to cut off the Pacific influence. And until we do see that, we really need to back off on any idea of well below normal temperatures around our region. And again, not much in the way of rainfall. We got one shot of a cold front here Monday morning. I got a few isolated showers. I think this is more overdone than anything else. And then that is about it. Very quiet. So that's everything I've broken down for this evening. Now I will take your questions, which should be interesting. And we'll go from there. Let's see. Snow Boss wants snow. I know. Believe me, I know. I know. Believe me, I understand. Especially if that is your business. And your business...
After our anniversary.
Oh, that is fair. Not until after our anniversary, which is very, very fair. But yeah, I would say that if you are north and west of the I-95 corridor, I think this is going to be a good year for you. I'm not that convinced as you head closer to the coast during a La Nina year. Saying that, there's still a lot. I'm very, very interested to see how this polar vortex develops over the next 10 days. It's going to be very interesting to watch. How does the Jersey Shore look for the weekend of October 12th to the 13th? That's a bit far out, but right now I don't see any major storms or anything significant. Near normal temperatures, certainly below normal precipitation. I don't see anything that is significant. Let's see here. And okay, someone has been...
Yeah, it was just hi.
Oh, someone wanted to say hi. That's okay. It's sad, but ESPN has fallen off a cliff. Yeah, it really is sad. It's hard to watch.
Disney ownership.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's see. I think I covered it. We're not getting much questions. Anything on X or...
I'll go check again.
Okay. We will check the questions. You know, if we don't have any...
Came on YouTube.
What's that?
YouTube. Something just came in.
Oh, all right. Are you concerned about a wintry bow zone type setup for this upcoming winter, which can cut down snowfall totals for major cities? During La Ninas in general, especially weak La Ninas, you typically end up with that battleground setup around the I-95 corridor. That's kind of like the hallmark of La Ninas. That can lead to a cut down of snowfall totals, but also an increase in ice potential. So it's kind of a... You can go hit and miss on that, all right, in terms of snowfall totals. But it doesn't mean you don't see winter storms. But typically during type of La Nina, if you get a negative NAO, then game on for everybody, you know. But I'm not as confident about that negative NAO forecast being sustained. My general rule when it comes to La Ninas is you do better north and west of I-95 corridor. For El Ninos, you have a better potential on the coast because you have more coastal storms. Anything on X?
Nope.
Nope.
Just YouTube.
All right. Not seeing any questions left here either. I know it is a holiday. I know that. What is it? Rosh Hashanah, I think. Mm-hmm. So, happy Rosh Hashanah. You're probably not here, so that makes sense. But other than that, if we don't have any questions, I pretty much went over everything else. And we got...
I didn't do it.
They're coming for me.
I have an alibi.
They're upset. They want me. Oh boy. Apparently we have fire trucks on the way. All right. So I think that might be a good signal. We're going to, since we don't have any more questions for tonight, and we have apparently sirens going on, I am going to shut down for tonight. I think we pretty much covered everything. We'll continue to keep an eye on the evolution of the storms. And next week, we won't be having a live chat, but we will have a live chat the week after. So just wanted to let you guys know that. In the meantime, stay safe out there. And as always, go Mets.